Okay, just getting back to the back of the start of this. There we go. We're on to Module 12 now, social diversity in the workplace. So diversity in the workplace. Some factors of diversity. Diversity can be understood as a range of human characteristics that differ from our own. They can include a range of demographics and psychographics factors. Demographics would be my age, my education, my gender, my race, ethnicity, or my customer's age, education, and so on. Psychographics is behavior, benefits, lifestyle, and values. So what are the advantages of having employee diversity? Well, it leverages cross-cultural awareness. We may have different perspectives in how we look at something, which may, if we're looking at a product, we may come up with a better way to produce the product with different ideas being implemented. Increases the productivity of your employees. It improves organization's employer brand. It improves market relevance of the company. So what are some challenges? Well, you could have an unconscious bias, which is a disconnect between the conscious thoughts and unconscious beliefs due to sociocultural conditioning. Reveals the participant's unconscious biases based on demographic factors. Biases will undermine an organization's brand and intent. So intercultural communications. Race and ethnicity. Capture the concept of race has changed across cultures and eras, geographic regions, ethnicity, skin color, etc. Ethnicity describes shared cultures of a group such as religion, language, and traditions. Race, individuals may be identified with ethnicities in complex ways, and some argue this isn't a choice. So our language, our communication, and diverse social groups classify people into social categories. Information about geographical location, socioeconomic states, and ethnicity can create a language barrier. Differences in what is polite, emotions, how to interact, what is appropriate. For example, here in the United States, my personal space is 4 feet. As long as it takes me to extend my hand and you to reciprocate in a handshake, in a business situation, you really should not be any closer to me than that, unless, of course, we're social distancing. But in many countries, it's a much closer area, which U.S. seems on footing because you're entering my space. Okay, each country has different languages, business practices, and social customs. Different countries have different interpretations of nonverbal communication, gestures, body movement, eye contact. Gestures are considered a cross-cultural communication blind spot. Religion. People who identify as religious may have different ideas and opinions about what is appropriate. Their beliefs are what topics are appropriate, beliefs about time off for work for religious gatherings, food allowances, meat and caffeine, the role of the family in personal, social, and work life, all different based on your culture and your religion. So culture and communication. Topics are linked and messages can be misconstrued without context. Intended message may not be what is received. And the book talks about the controversy with the Nike logo. It's perceived to resemble the Arabic, the swish basically. It resembles the Arabic word for Allah, which some Muslims consider to be disrespectful. Nike has apologized and implemented some changes to their design department. Writing across genders, using gender-neutral language. Replace gendered nouns with more neutral language, for example, firemen versus fire personnel. Choose equitable titles and names. Use pronouns equitably when there's more than one pronoun. Alternate genders and pronouns. Make pronouns plural. A pronoun is, he, she, we, they, it. Attitudes in gender communication. Men and women often interpret the same conversation differently, which causes miscommunication. I'm sure you've had that happen at some time in your life. Female create and foster connections with others. Males tend to establish identity, independence, and control. And leadership, as we know, is predominantly male. So working across abilities. Disabilities, lack of understanding due to minimal exposure, a person with a mental or physical impairment that limits their everyday lives. Some experience challenges, speaking, listening, reading text, staying on task, interpreting language, communicating. Depending on the type of disability incurred, it could be a number of things. Developing an accessible workplace, technology accommodations, For example, you could have a voice to type program. Language changes, allocate additional time, change the tone, moderate speaking pace, focus on abilities, and use specific language. Working across generations. Each generation is a subculture with different communication styles. Bridging the gap, generation gap, communicating barriers, different strengths and weaknesses. Create a compromise and try to make sure everything's inclusive. Okay, combating bias. Stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. There are stereotypes, of course, oversimplified generations about a group of people based on race, ethnicity, or gender. Prejudice can be against their beliefs, thoughts, and feelings someone holds about a group. Discrimination is the actions against a group of people. Prejudice and discrimination overlap and intersect. So biases in the workplace, it's important to be aware that bias can affect behavior. There can be microaggressions and micro-invalidations, which microaggressions are brief exchanges that send derogatory messages to an individual. Micro-invalidations cue that exclude thoughts, feelings, or the reality of certain groups. So our quick review, prioritizing diversity, we talked about Nike. Diversity drives recruitment of the most dynamic people, enriches community creativity, grows competitive advantage, heightens belief in brand. Diversity is a verb, action is required. Diversity is really a noun, but it can be a verb. Progress is never permanent, it always will be threatened, must be redoubled, reinstated, and imagined if it is to survive.